Part 1. The bridge too far. The rain had stopped just before dawn on September 17, 1944. A thin mist hung over the English airfields, drifting between rows of C-47 Dakotas and gliders. Men in maroon berets and khaki jumpsuits stood in silence, checking their weapons, tightening straps, glancing at the clouds. They were the Allied airborne divisions, British, American, and Polish, about to embark on the largest airborne assault in history. Ahead of them lay the Netherlands, and beyond that, the promise of an early end to the war. The dream 3 months earlier, after the bloody slog through Normandy, the Allies had finally broken out of France. The Germans were retreating across Belgium, battered and disorganized. Optimism spread like wildfire through Allied ranks. The end of the war seemed within reach. At his headquarters, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery studied a map stretched across an oak table. Red lines traced north through the Netherlands toward the German border. His finger hovered over a small Dutch city, Arnhem. Montgomery, gentlemen, this is the key. If we seize the bridges here, Eindhoven, Nijmegen, Arnhem, we can cross the Rhine and march straight into Germany. We could end the war by Christmas. Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey, it's ambitious, sir. A single road for supply, through enemy territory. Montgomery, smiling faintly, fortune favors the bold, Miles. Market Garden will be the stroke that ends it all. The plan was breathtakingly daring, and dangerously fragile. Operation Market, the airborne phase, would see over 35,000 paratroopers drop behind enemy lines to seize key bridges. Operation Garden, the ground assault, would send XXX Corps racing up a single narrow highway, Hell's Highway, to link up with the paratroopers and push into Germany. If any link broke, the whole chain would fail. The airborne hero sat the airfield, Major General Roy Urquhart, commander of the British 1st Airborne Division, adjusted his red beret and looked over his men. They were young, many had never seen combat. But their spirits were high. Nearby, Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, commanding the 2nd Parachute Battalion, tightened his chinstrap and addressed his company. Frost, our objective is the bridge at Arnhem. We take it, we hold it, and we wait for the tanks. It'll be tough, but remember, we're the first in, and we'll make history. Private Collins, grinning, how long till the tanks arrive, sir? Frost, 2 days, maybe 3. Then it's home for tea. Across the channel, General Dwight D. Eisenhower watched the operation unfold with cautious hope. He had doubts. Montgomery's plan ignored other fronts and concentrated forces in one narrow corridor, but the possibility of ending the war quickly was too tempting to ignore. Into the skies engines roared to life. The ground shook as hundreds of aircraft rolled down the runways. Paratroopers clutched their static lines, their faces pale but steady. Sergeant Baker, see you on the ground, lads. Private Dawson, if the bloody wind doesn't take us to Berlin first. The planes lifted into the morning sky, wave after wave, forming a massive silver armada stretching across the English Channel. Below them, ships sailed and tanks rolled. Above them, sunlight glinted off wings. It was a sight unlike any in history, the greatest airborne armada ever assembled behind enemy lines. The drops began just after noon. American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne landed near Eindhoven, their parachutes blooming like white flowers over green fields. The 82nd Airborne came down near Nijmegen, tasked with securing the vital bridge over the Waal River. Farther north, the British 1st Airborne descended. Near Arnhem, too far from their objective, and already under the eyes of German scouts. Radio operator, we're off course. Wind's pushing us east. Paratrooper, then steer west, damn it. The bridge is west. Within minutes, gunfire erupted. German anti-aircraft batteries tore through the skies. Gliders crashed into trees and fields. Paratroopers landed amid chaos. Lieutenant Frost hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up firing. He gathered his men, smoke rising in the distance. Frost, all right, lads, no time to waste. Arnhem's that way. We move fast, keep tight, and pray the Jerrys are asleep. They weren't. The unexpected enemy. Unbeknownst to Allied intelligence, 2 SS Panzer divisions, the 9th and 10th, were resting and refitting near Arnhem. Veterans of the Eastern Front, their tanks and armored cars were already moving before the paratroopers had even regrouped. At German headquarters in Oosterbeek, SS General Wilhelm Bittrich studied a captured map. Bittrich, Arnhem, they're coming for the bridge. Clever. But we'll be cleverer. Staff officer, do we counterattack? Bit rich, no. We wait. Let them come to us. Then we close the trap. As the day wore on, British radio communication began to fail. The radios had too short a range, static filled every channel, units were scattered, unsure of each other's positions. By nightfall, Frost's battalion had reached the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge, astonishingly intact. He set up defenses in nearby houses, turning them into makeshift fortresses. Frost, to his men, this is it. Hold this bridge at all costs. The tanks will be here soon. Private, and if they're late, sir. Frost, with a grim smile, then we'll make them sorry they were. The race begins. Meanwhile, far to the south, the tanks of XXX Corps rumbled into Holland, their engines growling across the flat fields. Civilians cheered and waved flags as the column thundered past. Liberation was at hand, but the road was narrow, the countryside flooded, and the Germans were far from broken. Snipers, ambushes, and hidden guns turned every kilometer into a fight. Tank commander, roadblock ahead. Infantry to clear. Infantry officer, move it, lads. Arnhem's waiting. Every hour lost meant more time for the Germans to react, and for Frost's men to stand alone. The shadow over Arnhem. Night fell over the burning fields. In the distance, the glow of Arnhem flickered against the horizon. Frost and his men could hear the rumble of tanks, too faint to be friendly. He leaned on the parapet of a ruined house, listening. The wind carried the faint echo of artillery from the south, but the road between them and relief stretched over 60 miles of chaos. Frost, quietly, a bridge too far. I hope Monty knows what he's asking of us. He turned, watching his men prepare for the night. They cleaned rifles, whispered jokes, smoked their last cigarettes. Above them, the stars burned cold and distant. Tomorrow, they would face the storm. Part 2, Hell's Highway. Morning broke red over the flat Dutch countryside, mist clung to the canals, and church bells rang faintly through the villages liberated just the day before. Down the narrow, elevated road from Eindhoven to Arnhem, the tanks of XXX Corps pushed forward, the spearhead of Operation Market Garden. The locals cheered as British Shermans rolled past, children waving flags, women offering apples and flowers. To them, liberation had come at last. To the soldiers, it was only the beginning of a nightmare. The road that ate men and machines. The highway north was beautiful and deadly, only a few meters wide. It ran like a causeway through open fields and flooded dikes. There was no room to maneuver. Every bend, every bridge was a potential ambush. Major General Brian Horrocks, commander of XXX Corps, studied the map on his tank turret. Horrocks, we must reach Arnhem in 2 days, gentlemen. 2 days, no delays. The airborne are counting on us. Colonel Vandela, with respect, sir, this road's a bloody funnel. The Jerrys only need to block it once. Horrocks, then make damn sure they don't. At first, the advance went smoothly. The Guards' armored division thundered through Eindhoven, linking up with the 101st Airborne, who had secured the first bridge at Sun, or rather, what was left of it. The Germans had blown it up hours before the paratroopers arrived. Now, engineers worked frantically to build a temporary Bailey Bridge as tanks and trucks piled up behind them. Engineer, we'll have it by dawn, sir. Horrocks, you'll have it by midnight, or you'll build it underwater. Fire in the fields by nightfall. The column stretched for miles, headlights glinting off steel, exhaust fumes hanging low. Then the first shell hit. A German 88mm gun concealed behind a farmhouse opened fire. The lead Sherman exploded in a sheet of flame, blocking the road. Panzerfausts cracked from both sides of the embankment. Tank commander, ambush. Left flank, suppressing fire. Infantry sergeant, we can't flank, sir. The fields are flooded. Tracer fire sliced the dark. Civilians dove for cover. Within minutes, the narrow highway became a killing zone. Soldiers called it Hell's Highway, and it would earn the name again and again. Voices of the airborne far to the north, at Arnhem, Lieutenant Colonel Frost and his men still held the bridge. For 2 days they had fought off tanks, artillery, and infantry, turning every building into a fortress. Their radios were nearly useless, static and silence. Frost, into radio, this is Frost at the bridge. Where the hell are you? No answer. Only crackling. Private Collins, maybe they're close, sir. Maybe tomorrow. Frost, tomorrow. Always tomorrow. The Germans were tightening the noose, mortars fell relentlessly. Snipers hunted from rooftops, civilians huddled in cellars, praying as the city shook above them. Among them was Anna van der Meer, a young Dutch nurse tending to the wounded in a church basement. Anna, to a wounded British soldier, "You'll be all right. Just hold on." Soldier, weakly smiling, "We all keep saying that, miss." The Dutch resistance behind the lines. The Dutch resistance risked everything to help the Allies. They guided paratroopers through back streets, smuggled ammunition, and carried messages under the noses of the SS. In a small farmhouse outside Nijmegen, resistance leader Jan van Hoof met with Captain Julian Cook of the U.S. 82nd Airborne. "Jan, the Waal Bridge is crawling with Germans, tanks, guns, everything. You'll need boats to cross." Cook, "Boats? We weren't issued any." Jan, grimly, "Then you'll have to borrow some from the devil." Cook's battalion faced an impossible task: cross the wide, exposed Waal River in daylight, under heavy fire, to capture the bridge from the far side. But if they failed, Frost's men at Arnhem were finished. Crossing the Waal the next afternoon, the wind tore across the water. American engineers dragged a handful of canvas boats to the riverbank. The paratroopers looked at them in silence. "Cook, gentlemen, this is it. We row across, we take that bridge, and we hold it. No retreat. No surrender. The men at Arnhem are counting on us." He looked up at the smoke over the city. "For them, we go now." The first waves pushed off, bullets whipping the water. Men rowed desperately, falling as machine gun fire tore through the boats. Bodies drifted downstream. Those who reached the far bank charged straight into the German defenses. Private Ray Bowman threw himself behind a concrete wall, panting. "Bowman, Jesus Christ, how are we still alive?" Cook, loading his rifle, "Because we don't have time to die." By dusk, they had done the impossible, seized the far end of the bridge. The road to Arnhem was open. For the moment, the bridge too far, but for Frost's men, it was already too late. At Arnhem, ammunition was gone, casualties mounting. The air was thick with dust and cordite. German tanks closed in from every side. Frost, hoarse, to his adjutant, "Tell the men, no surrender while we can still fight." Adjutant, "Yes, sir." Pause, adjutant, "And when we can't?" Frost, "Then we'll go down holding the bridge." The walls shook as another shell struck. Smoke poured from the windows. Outside, a white flag fluttered from a nearby house, civilians begging for mercy. Frost lowered his head. He knew the truth. The tanks were never coming. The ground advance stalls at the same time. XXX Corps was bogged down again south of Nijmegen. Bridges destroyed, convoys jammed, German reinforcements swarming. What had begun as a lightning thrust was now a grinding slog through mud and flame. Horrocks, we're 20 miles from Arnhem. 20. We must push on. Colonel Vandela, "We can't, sir, the road's cut again." Horrocks, slamming fist on the turret, "Damn this cursed road." Night fell. The sky glowed red from the fires of Arnhem. Men whispered that the British paras were still holding, but no one knew for sure. The dream of ending the war by Christmas was burning out, one bridge at a time. Voices in the dark in the ruins of Arnhem. Frost crawled among the wounded. His hand trembled as he passed a canteen to a dying soldier. "Soldier, did we hold it, sir?" Frost, "Aye, lad. We held it." Outside, German loudspeakers called for surrender. He looked toward the bridge, its steel arches lit by fire, and whispered, "Tell them we were here." Part 3, The Inferno at Arnhem, Arnhem. September 19, 1944. The town, once quiet and peaceful, was now a cauldron of smoke and shattered glass. Flames licked at rooftops. The air trembled with the crack of rifle fire, the shriek of mortars, and the endless echo of German tank treads on cobblestones. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost and his men of the 2nd Battalion, Parachute Regiment, had held the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge for 2 days, outnumbered, outgunned, and slowly being encircled. Their radio contact with the main force had gone silent hours ago. "Keep your heads down," Frost shouted as a shell exploded against the bridge's steel arch, showering sparks and twisted fragments. "They want this crossing, lads, but they'll have to come through us first." The men huddled in shattered buildings overlooking the river, firing from windows and doorways. Ammunition was running low. Medics worked in basements lit only by flickering lanterns, their hands red and trembling. "Sir, we're nearly out of point 303, a sergeant reported, then make every shot count, Frost replied grimly. We hold until the last round, or until we can't hold at all. Outside, German panzergrenadiers crept forward through smoke, supported by half-tracks. The defenders picked their targets carefully. Every burst of gunfire cost them bullets they could not replace. Across the river, civilians watched in horror as the battle consumed their city. A Dutch mother clutched her son to her chest as their home trembled. When will it end? She whispered. When they stop fighting, her husband said quietly. And not before. Meanwhile, miles away at Nijmegen, the 82nd Airborne and Guards Armored Division were locked in their own desperate struggle. Brigadier James Gavin, helmet scuffed and dusty, stared at the map spread across the hood of a jeep. If we don't take that bridge today, Frost's men are finished, he muttered. Tanks roared down the main road toward the bridge. The Germans had fortified the southern bank with machine guns, snipers, and 20mm flak guns. Let's go, shouted Major Cook, leading a company of paratroopers. They charged forward in small boats across the Waal River, paddling through gunfire. Men fell into the water, blood turning the current red. Those who reached the far side fought their way up the embankment, throwing grenades and firing point-blank. By dusk, the Nijmegen bridge was taken, but it had taken too long. At Arnhem, Frost's battalion was surrounded. German loudspeakers blared across the smoke-filled streets. English soldiers. You are completely encircled. Surrender now and you will be treated well. Frost laughed bitterly. They want our bridge? Tell them to come and take it. That night, flames turned the sky crimson. The British fired their last shells. Frost, wounded, watched as his men continued to fight room to room, house to house. He could smell smoke, cordite, and blood, everything that war left behind. By the morning of September 21st, the situation was hopeless. Buildings collapsed under artillery bombardment. The last radio message went out of ammo. God save the king. The Germans finally stormed the last stronghold. Frost, unable to stand, was captured alongside the remnants of his battalion. The bridge too far, was lost. At Oosterbeek, the rest of the 1st Airborne Division was in chaos. Supplies meant for them had been dropped miles away into German hands. Wounded lay in every house, every ditch. General Urquhart, exhausted and hollow-eyed, looked around the command post. Is there any word from Frost? None, sir, came the reply. We think Arnhem's gone. Urquhart's jaw tightened. Then we hold here until the Poles arrive. But the Polish parachute brigade, delayed by weather and miscommunication, could not land until it was too late. When they finally crossed the Rhine under fire, they found only ruins and retreating survivors. One Polish captain knelt beside a wounded British soldier and murmured, "We came for you, my friend, but the river was too cruel." The rain began to fall. Smoke mixed with fog, turning the battlefield into a gray nightmare. A British corporal, face blackened with soot, whispered, "Wasn't supposed to be like this, we were supposed to be in Germany by Christmas." Another soldier nodded weakly. Yeah. Home by Christmas. Then he slumped, lifeless, into the mud. Part 4, A Bridge Too Far. The morning of September 25, 1944, dawned beneath a sky the color of lead. Rain fell in sheets across the Dutch countryside, soaking the shattered remains of the 1st Airborne Division at Oosterbeek. For 9 days, they had fought like ghosts in a graveyard, surrounded, starving, bleeding, and out of ammunition. General Roy Urquhart stood in the ruins of a villa that had served as his headquarters. His face was streaked with grime, his uniform torn and stiff with dried blood. The wireless operator turned toward him, shaking his head. Still no contact with XXX Corps, sir. The river's too high, and the boats never came. Urquhart closed his eyes for a moment. He had believed in Montgomery's dream, the bold strike that would leap across the Rhine and end the war by Christmas. But dreams meant little in the mud and rain of Arnhem. Outside, stretcher-bearers carried the wounded through the flooded gardens. The air stank of cordite and rot. A chaplain whispered last rites over a dying soldier, his words almost drowned out by the rumble of distant artillery. A young private, barely 20, clutched his rifle with trembling hands. Are we going home, sir? Urquhart looked at him, and for a moment, he saw his own son's face in the boy's eyes. "Yes, son," he said softly. "We're going home." But not all of them would. Across the Rhine, the Polish parachute brigade, under General Sosabowski, struggled to reach the trapped British. Their rubber boats were riddled with holes, many sank before they could cross. Men were swept away by the current, their cries lost in the storm. "God help them," Sosabowski murmured, watching helplessly from the far bank. They fought like lions. That night, under the cover of darkness, Operation Berlin, the evacuation of Arnhem, began. Boats silently pushed off from the southern bank, manned by Canadian engineers. "Keep it quiet," one whispered. "If the Jerrys hear us, it's over." On the opposite shore, British paratroopers waited in the mud. When the first boats arrived, they climbed in silently, too exhausted even to speak. Some wept, others simply stared at the water. Hollow-eyed, Lieutenant David Muir helped lift a wounded friend into a boat. "Hold on, mate. Just hold on." The men smiled weakly. "Did we take the bridge?" Muir hesitated. "Not this time." Tracer fire suddenly ripped across the river as German machine guns opened up. Boats overturned, men screamed, but the crossing continued. Through courage and desperation, hundreds made it across. Thousands did not. By dawn, only fragments of the division remained. Frost's men were gone, captured or dead. The survivors stumbled into Allied lines, starved, filthy, and broken, but unbowed. A Canadian officer handed Urquhart a cup of tea as he stepped ashore. "Hell of a fight you boys gave them," he said quietly. Urquhart nodded, his voice hoarse. "We didn't get our bridge." The officer looked away. "No, sir. But history will remember you tried." In London, Montgomery stood before his staff, face pale with anger and exhaustion. "It was 90% successful," he insisted, pointing at the map. "We gained valuable ground." His aide, eyes downcast, said nothing. Everyone in the room knew the truth. Market Garden had failed. The cost was staggering: 17,000 Allied casualties, thousands killed, wounded, or captured. Arnhem remained in German hands. The road to the Rhine was still closed. In occupied Holland, the people would soon face the hunger winter, their hopes of liberation dashed for another long, cold season. Weeks later, under gray November skies, a Dutch woman knelt at the Arnhem Bridge, now scarred and twisted by battle. She placed a small bouquet of wildflowers between the cracks in the stone. Her son looked up at her. "Mama, who were they?" "The men who came to set us free," she whispered. "Did they win?" She paused. "Someday, yes. But not here." For the men who fought at Arnhem, their courage became legend. They had jumped from the skies, fought against impossible odds, and held a bridge that symbolized both hope and heartbreak. The operation had been daring, visionary, and doomed. A bridge too far, yet never forgotten.